World of Warfare presents the Battle of Taranto. Long before the First World War, the bulk of the Italian Navy had been based in the port city of Taranto on the southeast coast of Italy. Known as the Regia Marina's First Squadron, during the interwar period, the British Royal Navy worked up plans to counter the Italian Navy in the event of another war in the Mediterranean, including a second phase plan to capture the port after Italy's invasion of Abyssinia in 1935. During the Munich Crisis of 1938, Admiral Sir Dudley Pound, commander of the British Mediterranean Fleet, had serious concerns about Italian naval opposition in the Mediterranean, ordering his staff to relook at the Royal Navy's existing attack plans for Taranto. In a talk with Lumley Lyster, captain of the aircraft carrier HMS Glorious, Lyster resolutely maintained that his World War I-era fleet of Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers could easily deploy a night attack on Regia Marina assets anchored at Taranto. In response, Pound ordered training to begin immediately. Just a month before the start of World War II, Pound would advise his successor, Admiral Andrew Cunningham, about the Navy's plans for Taranto, which soon became known as Operation Judgement. The need for an attack on Taranto intensified after Italy entered World War II on the side of Axis forces on June 10, 1940. In short order, British and Italian forces engaged each other in North Africa during the Western Desert Campaign, and while the Italian Navy could easily resupply their troops based in Libya due to the Italian Navy's ongoing threat to maritime traffic on the Mediterranean, the British were now forced to reroute supply ships around the Cape of Good Hope up the east coast of Africa before transiting the Suez Canal for their base in Alexandria. The final shoe drop for Operation Judgement, however, came with the fall of France and the subsequent loss of the French fleet in the Mediterranean. The attack on Taranto was green-lighted after the Italian army halted at Sidi Barrani following a successful British offensive known as Operation Compass, which instantly freed up the British Mediterranean fleet for a direct attack on Italy. The Italian fleet at Taranto was a powerful one, including 6 battleships, 7 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 8 destroyers. And since Italian Navy Commander Admiral Inigo Campioni had no intention of risking his ships in a direct engagement with the British, it was up to the British to bring the fight to Taranto. Originally scheduled for Trafalgar Day on October 21st of 1940, a fire in an auxiliary fuel tank of one of the Swordfish subsequently destroyed 2 other planes. Further delays were caused by a fuel system malfunction on the aircraft carrier HMS Eagle, which was swiftly replaced by the brand new aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious that had just been released from its base in Alexandria. Commanded by now Rear Admiral Lyster, the battle group consisted of Illustrious, the heavy cruisers HMS Berwick and York, the light cruisers HMS Gloucester and Glasgow, and the destroyers HMS Hyperion, Ilex, Hasty, and Havelock. As for the attacking aircraft, the task force maintained 24 attack Swordfish and a handful of Fairey Fulmer fighters of the 806 Naval Air Squadron, the later providing air cover for the task force. Half of the Swordfish were armed with torpedoes, while the rest carried aerial bombs and flares for diversionary purposes. The torpedo bombs were fitted with duplex magnetic contact exploders, which proved to be extremely sensitive in rough seas or rough air, leading war planners to anticipate a bomber loss rate of some 50%. To overcome Taranto's shallow harbor depth of 39 feet, in an effort to prevent each bomb from diving too deeply, a drum was attached under the nose of each aircraft, from which a roll of wire led to the nose of the torpedo. As the bomb dropped after release, the added drag caused by the wire pulled up the nose of the torpedo, so that it belly flopped into the water before starting its forward motion. After reconnaissance flights out of Malta confirmed that the Italian fleet was still in port, attack plans were altered accordingly when the same reconnaissance photographs confirmed the presence of barrage balloons meant to thwart air attacks on surface weapons. On the night of November 11th, just as the carrier task force was forming up off the Greek island of Cephalonia, some 170 nautical miles from Taranto, the British sent a short Sunderland-flying boat over Taranto. Reconnaissance also confirmed that Taranto was heavily defended by 101 anti-aircraft guns, 193 machine guns, and 27 barrage balloons. The harbor was also supposed to be rigged with 42,000 feet of anti-torpedo netting, yet at the time of the attack, only a third had been rigged due to a scheduled gunnery exercise. The netting also failed to reach the bottom of the harbor, allowing Britain's belly-flopping torpedoes to clear the nets with a couple of feet to spare. The first wave of 12 Swordfish, led by Lieutenant Commander Kenneth Hooch Williamson, took off from Illustrious just before 2100 hours on November 11th, followed by a second wave of 9 about an hour and a half later. One aircraft from the second wave was forced to return when its auxiliary fuel tank detached from its release moorings, leaving the pilot with insufficient fuel for a round trip to Taranto. Another Swordfish was delayed by 20 minutes of repairs after a minor taxiing accident, leaving just 8 planes in the second wave of attackers. In the first wave of dive bombers, 6 were armed with torpedoes, 2 with flares and 4 250-pound bombs, and 4 with 6 250-pounders. After the group was inadvertently separated while flying through thin clouds, the two groups continued to Taranto independently, and when the larger group approached the harbor at 22:58 hours, 16 flares were dropped east of the harbor, followed by a dive-bombing attack that exploded multiple oil tanks. The next 3 aircraft, led by Lieutenant Commander K. Williamson, attacked over San Pietro Island, torpedo blasting a 27-foot hole in the side of the battleship Conte di Cavour, just beneath the waterline. Immediately after the successful strike, Williamson was shot down by heavy anti-aircraft fire, while the 2 remaining planes dodged barrage balloons and heavy anti-aircraft fire for an unsuccessful attack on the battleship Andrea Doria. The next subflight of 3 Swordfish attacked from a more northerly direction, slamming 2 torpedoes into the Littorio, while missing a third drop on the Italian Navy's flagship battleship, the Vittorio Veneto. Captain O. Patch's bomber force was next, and while they found the targets difficult to identify, they hit 2 cruisers moored at Mar Piccolo, hitting both with a single bomb each from 1,500 feet, followed by a third Swordfish that straddled and strafed 4 destroyers. The second wave of 8 planes, led by Lieutenant Commander J.D. Hale, approached Mar Grande Harbor, again from the north, dropping diversionary flares. 2 Swordfish targeted the Littorio, scoring 1 direct hit, while a second aircraft, despite receiving 2 hits by anti-aircraft fire, missed a drop on the Vittorio Veneto. The battleship Duilio was next, when a torpedo blew a massive hole in her forward hull, flooding both of her forward magazines. Lieutenant G. Bailey scored a successful hit on the Littorio just before anti-aircraft fire from the heavy cruiser Gorizia shot him down, the only aircraft lost from the second wave. The last Swordfish over the strike zone was the delayed plane caused by minor damage from a taxiing accident, arriving 15 minutes behind the second wave before performing an unsuccessful dive bomb attack on a heavy cruiser. Instead of an anticipated 50% loss rate, of the 2 aircraft shot down, the pilot and observer of the first Swordfish, Lieutenant Commander K. Williamson and Lieutenant N.J. Blood Scarlet, spent the rest of the war as POWs, while the pilot and observer of the second plane, Lieutenant G. Bailey and Lieutenant H. Slaughter, both lost their lives. While the extent of the damage was not fully known until Italy's surrender on September 3rd of 1943, the Conte di Cavour had a 39-foot by 26-foot hole in her hull, and when permission to ground her was delayed beyond hope, her keel touched the bottom at a deeper depth than hoped, killing 27 sailors and wounding over 100 more. Once settled on the bottom, only her superstructure and main armament remained above water. The Duilio suffered a slightly smaller hole of 36 feet by 23 feet and was saved by running her aground. The Littorio experienced significant flooding after 3 torpedo strikes, taking the lives of 32 sailors while wounding many others. Despite being run aground in an attempt to save the ship, by morning the Littorio's bow was completely underwater. While Cunningham and Lyster wanted to strike Taranto again on the next night, bad weather kept their planes on the flight deck. Yet in Britain's solitary night over Taranto, the Italian fleet lost half of its capital ships, leading to the transfer of all undamaged ships to Naples the next day. During the attacks, the Italians fired 13,489 shells from land batteries, while several thousand more were fired from ships. Of the 22 searchlights available at Taranto, commanding officer of the HMS Illustrious, Dennis Boyd, stated in his after-action report, "It is notable that the enemy did not use the searchlights at all during either of the attacks." Repairs to the Littorio took roughly 4 months to complete, while the Duilio took 7. The Conte di Cavour underwent extensive salvage work that was incomplete by the time of Italy's surrender. Cunningham wrote of the attack, "The Taranto show has freed up our hands considerably, and I hope now to shake these damn ities up a bit. I don't think the remaining 3 battleships will face us, and if they do, I'm quite prepared to take them on with only 2. Italy's losses at Taranto shifted the balance of power to the British Mediterranean Fleet, allowing the British Royal Navy to split into 2 battle groups for the first time in the war, each built around a lone aircraft carrier and 2 battleships. Cunningham's assessment that the Italians would remain in port was quickly proven wrong, when 5 days after the Taranto raids, Campione sortied with 2 battleships, 6 cruisers and 14 destroyers, successfully disrupting an Allied mission to deliver aircraft to Malta. A year after the Taranto raids, the Italian Navy exacted revenge during its raid on Alexandria, when the Royal Navy was attacked by midget submarines, causing severe damage to the battleships HMS Queen Elizabeth and Valiant. After years of post-war reassessment, however, Britain's raid on Taranto failed in its primary objective of disrupting Axis convoys to Africa, instead witnessing an increase in Italian shipments to Libya between the months of October 1940 to January 1941, delivering 49,435 tons per month, up from 37,204 monthly average tons over the previous 4-month period. Nor did Britain's Taranto raids go unnoticed by the Japanese, who carefully studied the raids during the planning stage of their attack on Pearl Harbor, another shallow port that challenged the use of conventional torpedo bombs. After the Taranto raids, Japanese Lieutenant Commander Takeshi Naito, the Assistant Naval Attaché to Berlin, flew to Taranto to witness the damage firsthand, who then personally held a lengthy conversation with Commander Mitsuo Fushida, who led the December 7, 1941 attack on Pearl. Even more significant, however, was a Japanese military mission to Italy in May of 1941, who held more lengthy discussions with Italian naval officers stationed at Taranto. They also began working on shallow water solutions to existing torpedo bomb technology, employing a breakaway wooden nose to soften its impact with the water, tested firsthand in various shallow ports such as Manila, Singapore, and Vladivostok, making the Battle of Taranto a daring attempt by the British to defang the Italian Navy.